This is some feedback. All right, come on, Brad.
No, I just will kind of, welcome the conversation. I'll kind of let y'all decide kind of how you want this to go and where you want me to talk about, and we can kind of go from there.
All right, does anybody want to kick us off with questions or comments or concerns or?
3% COLA, insurance up, the rest of it's operating.
Yeah, so I would say the general kind of meat and potatoes of it, and I didn't touch on it when I presented. Close to 60% of this budget is related to personnel. When the mayor and I started and Don started creating this budget, our first priority was to take care of our employees in a very competitive market. And kind of to lay the land is without our people, the services we provide just aren't possible. So it was important to us to make sure that we were keeping the people we had here and also keeping us competitive. But with that came a significant increase in RSA, which basically is kind of out of our hands. It is a good recruiting tool that we use. Was a better tool years ago, but it's still a pretty good recruiting tool that not a lot of places can offer that we do. But it is a significant cost. It's over $6 million for a year. So
we proposed $6.8 million for RSA for FY25, correct?
yes, sir.
And in FY22, that was 4.4. So there's $2.4 million that is eaten up on something we don't really have any control over, other than number of employees.
Correct. Yeah, and so how that really works, without getting too complicated, is we part of our audit requires an actuarial analysis that's done each year. And basically what they do is they go in and they look at our pool of employees, and this ranges from gender to the job to how much they make. And they're using statistics to kind of forecast how much money's coming out of our pool, how much needs to go in, and then they come up with the rate for employee contribution, and we use that and we stick it in with our calculations to labor, and you get your budget for RSA.
So, and I said FY22, FY23 was 5.1, so there's 1.7 million in two budgets. That's
yeah, and when I say significant, it was the largest jump that I had seen since creating budgets for each category. Remember, we have a tier one, what I call an original tier one, and then years ago we switched from the tier two back to the what I would call tier 1A, which returned a lot of those retirement benefits back to similar to what the original people.
I think it's
You anticipate it to come down in 26, right?
Yeah, so this hadn't happened either. They sent us rates for next year. I don't know the validity of them. I guess we can kind of wait and see, but the rates for next year are very similar to this year.
So we may not see a 9%.
We may. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up because all it takes is an additional letter from, for me, it's hard to understand how they could do that without an actuarial report and seeing the performance of the portfolio 12 months from now.
right. They're not going to come down, but the percentage increase would be less.
Yes.
It was like 0.9, where this year it went up 9%.
But still an increase.
Yes.
Yeah. And then medical, and the reason I compared to FY23 is we had 559 budgeted, or sorry, funded positions in the city, and that's what we have this year. So medical goes from 5.6 to 6.8 between those two budgets. So just pointing out that, 1.7 million increase in RSA, and then 1.2 million increase in medical. So, you know, there's $3 million in two budgets that's gone. And then when we look at salaries, and we all know why we've given COLAs, I think we gave a 5% 2 years ago. Six. So we had salaries, again, with 559 people, just under $29 million in FY '23, and this year it's nearly $36 million. So that's really where, you know, as revenues grow, I've kind of always complained about we're still struggling to balance, you know, the expenses running the city, even as much as revenues have increased. Well, you can really point to those numbers as the major driver of that, I think. Our
Absolutely.
debt service has not really increased a whole lot in comparison to the budget. So it's really, it gets eaten up. And like you said, we've got to be competitive in recruiting, retention. We compete against the private sector.
I should add, I don't think I mentioned it in the presentation, but there has been a strong push the last couple of years for investments in technology. What that does is kind of create some efficiencies for us to use some of the labor we're using with people through technology. And at the same time, to kind of update certain processes that we do. I know personally in our revenue department, we're striving towards being able to have our taxpayers purchase a business license online. Seems very elementary, but we currently don't have that in place.
And that's part of that river tree, right?
City View.
City View.
Yes, sir. So what that does is during a very busy 2 or 3 months from a license standpoint, it creates some efficiencies for an already lean revenue department to be able to go and do other things that we haven't had the resources to do. So the investment has multiple direct dominoes that can kind of fall if we keep going towards that way.
Kyle, there's always been discussion on unfilled positions in the budget. Council President's brought that up a few times, but are those all in here as well?
So they are, but if I want to point out the credit, I guess, is what we put into in a miscellaneous account. And essentially, I think it was 2 years ago we decided to do this. We've always had a large payroll lapse. I think last I heard is we typically fund 560-ish.
It's 559.
559, and I think we really only have close to 500 physical people working and we're paying for. So what we've done to alleviate some of that, what I would call contingent budget, is we put a credit in there. I think it's close to 1.5 million, which is again conservative to how much lapse we've been seeing over the years, to alleviate some of that budget that would just be sitting there idle and have it be utilized for what we're trying to do. Again, we do that in that miscellaneous department because we can't 100% pinpoint where the lapse is going to be. You can make an estimated guess, but it's always moving because we have people resign or retire, create some lapse there, and it's a guessing game. So,
on a positive note, I do appreciate, one, I know we added 3 battalion chiefs to the fire department, and we are at the same number of employees we had in '23 that are funded in the budget. So there's been some attempt, and you mentioned that Monday.
yeah.
Just kind of
So we had a department head meeting we have regularly back in July when we kind of kicked off the budget season. Typically sit there and kind of give the lay of the land of what we're shooting for, and it really helps that the department heads know where we're at as well, because they're the constructors of each segment of that budget. And that was a conversation we had where we really wanted them to take an analysis of when you have someone resign or a retirement and truly determine whether or not that position is needed, or can there be adjustments made, because at that point it's an opportunity to do that when the person isn't there.
And then there was a significant, I would say, cut to overtime, if you can kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yep. So that was towards the later stage of trying to get it balanced. We kind of looked at it as a managerial philosophy. We felt like in some cases, how do I want to put this? In some cases, that there wasn't a stern enough philosophy on the use of it. And so in order to make certain things work, we kind of had to put a foot down and say, this is the overtime you're going to get, and let's manage our employees to that amount.
And don't come back at mid-year
Correct.
saying you've used up all your overtime, expecting to get a bump at mid-year.
So the overtime cut was cut by 166 for the entire system.
Yes, sir. We,
15%, wasn't it?
yeah, and we had to exclude public safety. Obviously, there's legal requirements that we have so many firemen at the stations for every shift and so many officers on shift. So we excluded those in the calculation and did the cut with the others.
And we explained to the departments that things might arise that they need to come before you.
Correct.
To seek additional funding for OT.
It's slowly decreased over the years. I think we've made an emphasis of it with our department heads, and they've done a good job with understanding that and getting to where we are. And now this is kind of another
I would
significant
think a
step.
majority of that overtime, though, is in public safety, right? I mean,
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec
There was
has,
a significant amount in Parks and Rec.
yes, Parks and Rec.
Then we, for the first time that I can recall, to get the budget where it needed to be, a 10% reduction in our appropriations.
Yes, excluding our 4-year contract we have with Convention for Visitors Bureau and the Best and Brightest program, which is primarily funded by the Water for Resale, which is for economic development. And the 911. And the 911 was excluded as well.
On just kind of moving to revenue, and we mentioned this Monday, but you've got sales and use tax projected 49.3 million of revenue for FY '24. I know we got a little bit we're a guess there, but probably pretty close. And then, which is less than FY '23, which is 49.8. So it looks like, we're going to have a $95.7 million, or we have a $95.7 million budget. Last year, we think that FY '24 brought in about $95 million.
Sure.
So it's pretty level what you're budgeting, which I think is right on. The significant increase we've had over the last 2 years, I'm assuming you have it under revenue from money and property, but that's probably interest income that we moved some accounts and started making a better return there.
Yes, sir.
Which will come down after today, I'm assuming.
Yep.
That is tied to some sort of index that we just got a 50 basis point drop. Or is it not?
It is not. Well, there's portions of it.
Yeah.
So you remember, I think 5 or 6 years ago, we have portions that are tied to the ladder with Raymond James. So those are backed off of CDs and a mix of CDs and SBIC. The way that works is as they mature, the gentleman that works for us will reach out to me as it relates to getting them into available instruments. And I will say throughout this year, what we were maturing from and getting into was significant. We were getting in things that were like 1.8, 2%, and now we're getting in CDs that are close to 6%. So that is an explanation for that. On the other end, a lot of our operating cash that sits in Renaissance Bank was making significantly less than what was agreed upon.
Basically a savings account.
Correct. And we're making 4%. I think
4.25.
4 or 4. I can look that up for you. That was changed at the beginning of this year as well. And then you add our settlement money that came in, influx in cash, having more cash at a higher rate just generates more interest.
And
But
that
again,
cash will go away.
Correct. Again, expect some decrease there as the cash is being spent on the purposes that we have it for.
Do you know the difference in other revenues from 23 to 25? It's like 240,000 to 1.4 million. I know that's kind of off the
I'd have to look it up. I don't know exactly what's built into there.
What-
Other revenues. I don't know if you have the detail behind it. I can get you that answer.
I got it.
Sorry about that.
No. Didn't give you a heads up. Over to the expense side.
Yep.
If you, and I know this is probably difficult to answer, but if you have any that kind of, what the variances were, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, the top line, there's an 11% decrease, mayor and council, about $74,000
Yep.
year over year. Do you know what?
Yep. Miss Susan, who was a tenured administrative assistant, she retired, and the cost of the new employee is
It's
less
just salary difference.
there, and then the cutting of red sage.
Okay. And then municipal court was a 23% increase.
Yeah, we had to reshuffle. Some of that cost was paid for out of our corrections fund, and the performance of that fund wasn't there to do the same thing as we did last year, so that cost had to come back into the general fund, and that's typically all payroll-related costs.
City clerk's office was about 260,000 more. My assumption was election year.
2 elections we're planning for, typically the general election and then a runoff.
Mun-
And they're both within the fiscal year.
The municipal
The
election next
municipal
year.
Municipal
election
election,
and then runoff
Would still be in it?
would still be in fiscal year,
Yeah.
whereas prior, 2020 and prior, those two budgets were always split between fiscal years because the runoff was normally in October.
Okay.
And what'd you say the change was in mayor council? It was Susan retiring, and
And
what
a
else?
decrease in red sage. So remember, we only have funding in there to the end of the contract, which is December.
But it was down $73,000, correct? Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so explain that, please.
So we reduced, and I don't have the exact amount, we reduced red sage by 9 months' worth,
Okay.
okay? And Miss Susan's,
The difference, the delta.
the delta between Miss Susan and Miss Harris is also a decrease as her cost is less than Susan was.
Red Sage is about 175.
175.
But keep in mind as well,
That's right.
there is a COLA, all that COLA increase is added into Miss Harris's position as well.
Okay.
If you'd like for me to break that out, itemized, Mr. Jackson, I more than definitely can do that for you.
We'll talk about that, but.
Okay.
Public building line item was 17% decrease.
Yeah, so there was a administrative assistant that was partially coded to that account last year, and she is 100% coded in the Parks and Rec Department. And then there was a significant decrease in HVAC repairs and preventative maintenance, and that just is a testament to the carrier stuff that we're doing, getting ahead of some of the bigger costs we have as it is to HVAC.
Fire, 13% increase. I assume the 3 battalion chiefs is
That's
the
it.
driver.
That is it. And the
Solid
COLA.
waste, 16% decrease.
Yep, so less equipment of the large equipment's being purchased, that goes to that life cycle plan. We bought a lot last year. We're getting close to the stage where it's gonna be less. And then we purchased the carts. Y'all approved the budget amendment to do it earlier, and that was taken out of the budget for next year.
Beautification, 165% increase.
So last year it was budgeted in Parks and Recreation. We've switched duties to Daniels, and he's in charge of it now, so that's moved into the beautification department.
DYS, is that mainly personnel?
Yes, sir.
It's 11.5%.
The temp services, if you remember when we switched to Spur, there was an uptick in cost for that service. And so with that comes more costs in temporary services.
And then Point Mallard, 12.7.
So the COLA, again, the temporary services. And then last year, if you remember, at mid-year, you adjusted temporary services. So essentially what I'm saying is the beginning number we had wasn't necessarily as accurate as it should have been last year. And so the number we're using this year is more accurate to the operations that they're running this year. There was also some, I guess, maintenance or repairs to some of their facilities. I think the ice cream facility has an upgrade. The main concession building had, I believe, a leak in the roof, and we had to replace the oven. And the purpose of replacing the oven is it's a high revenue generator.
Can you, I know there's probably a lot in that line, but the miscellaneous line, just kind of give us an idea.
So in that miscellaneous line, you're going to see large expenses for utilities, our insurance, workers' comp, OPEB, pest control, janitorial, and dumpster service.
Did any of those have a significant, like, any of those stand out as an outlier as far as increase?
Well, the janitorial went up a little bit, and y'all are privy to that. I think we added some services in preparation for the Causeway project. That was kind of the reason for what had happened. We had pest issues with them biting rats and mice biting or maybe it was chipmunks, biting the wiring. So we had never had pest control on that, and so kind of get ahead of the repairs that are coming, we added that service, and they've already started taking care of that, so we don't have that problem again.
Okay. And then at the bottom, other financing uses.
So that is going to be your transfers to other funds. So that's the transfer to the Personnel Board, and then our portion of the city dues for MPO and our grant fund match.
Okay. All right. Can you, or the mayor, either one, speak to any, maybe just give a little bit of thoughts around meetings with department heads and kind of how you thought about that this year with, we had big budget increases from especially 21 to 22, 22 to 23, and it's especially 22 to 23 when you look at actuals. I can't remember how the budget looked, but big revenue jumps, and that's changed. Just kind of the methodology, thought process when you were meeting with the departments, and I'm assuming a lot of personnel discussion over time, but.
Really, it's an opening that I end up doing whenever we meet with departments. And it starts with what Kyle mentioned, that we're been having some nice times doing budgets in previous years. This year's different. We want to be able to reward our employees with a 3% COLA. And in order to do that, we're going to need to really work hard on level funding. And that was the direction that we went in.
Yeah.
And they were very helpful.
You mean level funding to the department?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And most of I can remember years ago where we went through line by line by line with every single one of them, and these meetings now have kind of turned into just general discussion where we highlight some of the increases if there are any, or some of the decreases. But for the most part, they did a really, really good job working with the finance liaisons. To the time we got to the meeting, there really wasn't a whole lot to talk about. It was very level. They understood our priority one, and they worked well with us to try to accomplish that. Now, there were some things that were a need, and that's the key word, is really focused on needs and not wants.
Well, and both. There's always the P2s.
Correct.
And so things that were questionable went to the P2s.
And we do it all year as well, with the budget checkups.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good point. There are, I guess, quarterly checkups with our liaisons where they're reviewing the budget, actuals to budget, and just getting some communication or giving them some indication of areas they kind of need to be looking at. Now, I think the department heads are doing that anyways, but it's never a bad idea to have us kind of give a high-level oversight and a little reminder here and there in case they have overlooked something.
Kyle, if you will, for the guests that are with us, I know you're addressing the council, but just define what P2 is.
So P2 is essentially the priority, we call it P2, priority 2. So we talk about needs and wants. I never ever want me to be the person that decides what they get, because that's the council's job. So from a transparency standpoint, everything they ask for, we put on some sort of detail so you're aware of what they're asking for. So the P2 kind of serves as a secondary list that in previous years when we've had a little more money to do things, we've went into and done. And you have opportunity to do that this year. It just, things are a little bit tighter than they previously were, so.
Just not right now.
Just kind of to point out, my concern has always been our actuals in 2021 were about just under 76 million in revenue. And we're projecting FY25 to be 95 million. It's basically a $20 million increase since FY21. And our personnel cost, when you look at salaries, RSA, medical, and overtime, is about 13.5 million in that. And I think you can logically put the dots together that inflation, cost of an HVAC, cost of a fire truck, cost of a fleet, a mower that we just approved last week was drastically different in FY21. I mean, that's the whole story, is we have a lot more revenue, but it's really personnel expense and we know why. I'm not saying, I appreciate that we have 6 more employees budgeted than we did in FY22. So actually that's 1 year. It's actually more than that's increased since FY21. I'm looking at FY22.
Especially the 3 and the BCs.
Yeah.
That was really neat.
I want to point out this, because you make a good point, how our head count has stayed stagnant. I would say we're doing more for the city than we did in 21 today with the same amount of people.
I hope so, yeah.
I can speak on finance, revenue, and purchasing and give you 100% assurance we are doing more than we did in 21, in 24 with less people.
Yeah. Well, this is the same debate every company, every municipality,
Absolutely.
We got to have good people. We've got to pay people appropriately to keep good people and to recruit good people. You got to have good benefits. It's just extremely competitive, but it's a fine line. It's your most expensive asset and your most important asset. Mm-hmm. And we just got to continue to be cognizant of that. So.
We will always look for the most cost-effective alternative, whether that's a consultant or a third party or hiring more people to provide the best service at the best cost.
Yeah.
What's the word?
My word's deliverables.
It is all about the deliverable.
Revenue's question that we have an answer for. That's the windows and signs for the offset capital assets.
Sale of capital assets as it relates to the solid waste.
Okay. I'll say one more thing, and I'll shut up. Well, maybe. On Red Sage specifically, and I'll mention 2 things. Red Sage, I will bring back before the contract is over, and we can vote on it, either up or down. But when you look at some of the things in one Decatur that are mentioned, that were priorities, that type of initiative is one of those. When you look at successful cities, when you go to a Trash Pandas game, the city of Huntsville is blasting you with information. They're doing it on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I think what they have done has been successful. I think it's been really good. They're putting out excellent work. They're local, which I appreciate. They're utilizing 12, 13, 14 people that have expertise in marketing in different disciplines, whether that's creative, social media advertising, all those things, video. They've got, you could not hire a team to do what they're doing for less or even close to what we're paying. So that will come back. I think y'all kind of know where I am. We do have results. I know Mike, you've asked some of those questions. We do get those results quarterly. I've got some with me actually. They're very positive. The growth of the campaigns, the feedback, the reach that it gets outside of just the city of Decatur has been impressive. So just want y'all to know that will come back before the council before the contract is up.
One of the things of what you just shared, they were able to show favorable results, and our residents seem to buy in, whereas there was another firm that we used, it was just the opposite. Didn't work well.
And then the other thing I'll say is just on appropriations, and Sherry's here and we'll talk later, but I'm a little passionate about the library. I have young kids, and my wife and family members, my sister-in-law and her family, people go to the library, especially kids, for these. And the one thing I learned when I first came on board the council and met with Sherry for the first time is during COVID, kids who did not have internet access were going to the library to be able to do school, maybe sitting in the parking lot using the Wi-Fi. They help seniors and others that maybe can't afford accountants to do their taxes for them. So there's all kind of benefit. This is a significant, very significant cut to the library. It also will include some state funding, and I'll let you speak to that later if you want to. It's nearly $80,000, $80,000, and I read in the paper you had a little bit of a shortfall, but it was close, a couple of $1,000s with the county. So there's some real ramifications. There may be a way, maybe at mid-year or later on down the road, that we need to look at some of these organizations and look at how we can help them, especially with the benefit. I can just speak personally to the library. I'm the liaison, so I'm biased, but that provide a lot to our city and county that maybe we hopefully can look at helping with funding down the road in this fiscal year. So, and that's, but with that, it was a tight budget. It's the first one Mr. Jackson's seen budgets that were less the year than they were the year before. And but for us that are new on the council, it's been the first time it really got pretty tight to make it balanced. So I understand the thought process on both of those items. So now I'm going to shut up. And hopefully one of y'all will talk.
I usually let you handle the personnel side of things, because I know it's coming. But no, I would say, I mean, just to add some context to it, this was probably the easiest one to digest, because, normally we do have, more revenues than budget expenditures, and hey, here's this P2 list, what do you guys want to throw into it? This year it's like, here's a P2 list, forget about it. This is just, so you can be aware of what some of the wants are. And I want to commend those of you, Mayor, Kyle, department heads who worked on this. I imagine it was kind of easy this year when you start with, hey, we're just going to start where you were last year, and if you want to change, you better prove it. So
I'll never say the budget's easy.
I don't have any questions. I know you've answered a lot today. You've answered some before today. Just want to say thank you all to the mayor, Kyle, the whole finance team. Y'all done a great job. Not the easiest year, but I am really appreciative of the philosophy of starting out the budget with a COLA. We've been fortunate to be able to do that. Our city employees are that important. I understand Joe's concerns, and personnel share a lot of those same concerns, but it is important that our employees know that we appreciate them, the work they do. We'll continue to do everything we can to remain competitive.
Well, then, thank you. And you don't want to get behind and try to catch up.
Well, the city had been there before, and
Yes, sir.
I think we've tried to catch up. And
Right.
We've felt the pains of that.
yeah.
All right, any other discussion on the budget from the council or mayor? We did have some folks sign in, and I want to give a chance to ask questions. We'll do our typical 3 minutes and a minute to wrap up, and I'll just go in order. But James, is it Lehman? Lehman. Is first.
Forgive me, I'm the pastor of the Salvation Army, so if I tend to meander or run too long, just let me know. My name's Jim Lehman. I'm the sergeant over at the Decatur Salvation Army, my wife Becky. Back in 1904, the Salvation Army was invited to come to Decatur to take care of what at that point was a homelessness problem, panhandlers going door to door to ask for things. And they wanted to have it kind of unified behind one organization to take care of those situations. So the poor, the homeless, people in need will never go away, and it's been around in Decatur for 120 years, and will likely was before that and will be after that. We don't expect it to go away, but we do would like to help those folks who are in need, down on their luck, whatever the situation may be. We have the only facility that's currently not being used. It's been closed for almost 4 years now, before we were stationed here. We are the only facility between Huntsville and Florence. So right now, if someone comes to a need, it's really too hot, or they need, someplace to spend the night to get off the street, best we can do is, sorry, we can't help you. We would like to reopen our men's facility. I'm sure at some point, women also have a need. We have a family facility for those that we can house small families, but we only have 7 apartments for that. We could house up to 50 folks overnight, but our facility has been closed. It is in need of a lot of repair. It was built, I think, in the 70s, or maybe remodeled in the 80s, but it needs a lot of work before we could even reopen it or consider reopening it. Times are tough. We haven't had the money. We don't have the staff. That was part of the reason why it closed in the first place. I think we're upwards of around $160,000 to even get started. Now, we're not coming to the city to say, city, we need you to pony up to take care of everything, but if we could get some support, we certainly would appreciate it. Not only we would provide them the overnight care, but we also would like to get to know them better. What do they need? What do they need? Financial literacy classes, or drug and alcohol classes, or rehab? We can hook them up with health care, financial assistance. Maybe they don't have a high school diploma, so we can hook them up with ESL connection. Basically, our goal is not to just house them and let them maintain their lifestyle. It's to find those who actually want to have their lives changed and want to get off the street and be treated humanely. And there are lots of those, if not all of them, who want that. So I'm not here to ask for a specific amount. I just want to make the need known, and we'd appreciate your support.
Can you hold on just a second?
Yes.
I appreciate that. A couple of questions. I know when you were open, there were some, when people just, if you don't know, remember the specifics, but there's a cost to folks that want to spend the night, and there's certain hours that you have to be in or out. Can you give me?
We do call it an overnight facility. So we can provide them an evening meal, a morning meal, and then provide them overnight. The amount to spend the night, what was it, $5, $2?
They used to charge $12.
$12?
We're not of the opinion that is,
That money's not significant because
Okay.
it doesn't pay for much of anything.
But it was a $12. I think
It was
that's right,
$12,
yeah. And there's certain hours you had to be out.
Yeah, they'd have to be out by 8,
and close at 7:30.
7:30. So they would not linger on the property. That's not the goal, to hang out, but at least they'd be able to go to a job, or they'd have food for that day.
So let me ask you a question, though. You're saying that there's no specific amount. There's got to be, I mean, you've got to have.
Oh, well, we'd like as much as,
I mean, of course, you'd like $10 million, but I mean, realistically, what do you, I mean, what's the number that?
we need 160 to reopen. And that's without counting in personnel.
Is that the 50 people number?
Yeah. We have an air conditioning unit that needs replaced on top, and that's in a commercial air conditioner.
And you guys obviously get funding from local
We have some local.
churches, folks.
United Way.
United Way.
Industry? Do you get funding from industry?
Yes. Right now, we don't get a lot. We just had our United Way cut a year before. Everyone's having trouble raising money. Everybody is asking for money, so funds are getting cut. We are still talking with the local industrial plants around here, trying to get additional funding. As companies come in, we try to, ask them if they'd like to support us. Everything's a slow process. You got to talk to a lot of people, so it's always a long time to get funding.
I think as you heard, we actually are cutting appropriations this year, and that makes it difficult. But I am curious, and I know some of the guys up here are very involved, I think, with Salvation Army. I might like to look at a budget that you guys have, and kind of what the intake of donations looks like and where that comes from. And it may not be for the city council, but I think I can probably help you fundraise a little bit. So,
Can I offer
That would
a
be-
suggestion? If you'll go to our website and to the finance department, there is a appropriations request form, hot link on there. And just complete that form, and it will call for a budget, won't it?
yeah.
It'll keep
And
things consistent.
they have had some conversations with Alan Stover about potential grant opportunities, ADECA, some things that they can apply
You
for
have any
as well. so-
connections, or have we already filled that out, or?
No, we have not.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. I appreciate you coming, and but that's. I think it's going to be tough for us to include any additional appropriations when we've
I
been
understand.
cutting who we fund. But I think, you guys, the Salvation Army has a long.
We're just going to make a regular appearance here,
No, we appreciate it. But thank you. Y'all have any other?
Thank you.
questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One point I want to make, Kyle, something I'd like to look at is I think we require audited financial statements. And is there a dollar request associated with that, or we require audited statements from any appropriation request?
So most nonprofits will have these statements as part of their operations, whether it's for a requirement for a line of credit or some other external requirement. So we always ask for those. But there has been a point where we were asking for an audit, which I know will cost more than what we would give them in appropriations. So I think that there are some other methods, we can kind of get that assurance of what we're trying to do with an audit, whether it be a compilation or some tax-prepared financials or agreed-upon procedures that are significantly less cost-wise.
I would just like to take a look at that.
Sure.
I mean, an audit, you know, you can get a very significant line of credit with a bank without an audited statement these days.
Right.
And an audit is very expensive, and it's also kind of a pain.
Yeah.
So if we can look at that policy
Yep.
maybe for next year.
We've tried to work with everyone on that. I know.
I think you
it's
guys
a-
have. I haven't really heard a complaint, but
Okay.
I just know if you're requesting $10,000, you may pay
Yeah.
$3,500 for an audit, and it's,
I do think I don't want to take it completely away of the package. I think it's important to kind of see, you know, for us, how much we're contributing versus the county or other entities.
Well, I think-
And you can kind of get a lay of the land of how that money's being implemented, because at the end of the day, when we're giving these appropriations, our expectation is that the community service or the community outreach they're
and
doing
an audit
is
has
done.
testing. You know, this number says you
Right.
did this, and we're going to go actually audit and see if that's what it is. A reviewed statement doesn't have that. I get all that, but that is,
Yeah, my concern would be the lower value appropriations. 15, 20, maybe we could even look at a threshold, but, you know, if you're getting a $20,000 appropriation, it costs you for less than that, $10,000, like you said, you know, you gotta spend $3,000 or $4,000 to get it, and
Yeah.
then you're losing.
An audit's going to be more than $3,000 or
But they may
$4,000.
be required to do it for other people.
and if they have an audited statement, yes. But again, I know that you.
Some don't. I've
Yeah.
got one that doesn't, and that was
Yep.
one of their issues.
Understand.
Okay, sorry, just a sidebar. Sherry was next.
Thank you so much for allowing me a few minutes to speak to you today. I just received, word this morning of the proposed budget and the cuts to appropriations, and we do understand that those. I do want to briefly, before I tell you about the side effect of that, all of the good that your appropriation does for us every year. You all do a lot of good for the library, and you will do a lot of good for this community. This past fiscal year, our patrons checked out over 184,000 materials. We answered 18,000 reference questions. We did 265 programs attended by 29,924 residents. Patrons took advantage of 48,692 internet sessions. And one of our big things that we do every year is early literacy, and that is, we are the first stop for babies before they even get to preschool. And if you think that that doesn't pay off, children that consistently have early literacy development test in the 90th percentile regardless of what the standardized test is. Those are dividends for life. And this year, we did 154 early literacy programs attended by over 5,400 little ones. And that's thanks to all of you and what you do. When I came to Decatur Public in 2015, we had 25 employees. We now, as of an hour ago, we just hired someone else, are almost fully staffed at 13. We are small but mighty. However, one of the side effects of us getting a budget cut, of which you may not be aware, is that our local funding appropriations are very closely tied to our state aid. And that is because in the Alabama Public Library Service Administrative Code, one of the stipulations, and this is Administrative Code Section 520-2-2.04, is that if we are not, to paraphrase, if we are not level funded by our local appropriations, our state aid will also be cut. I double checked with Montgomery. They just confirmed with me an hour ago that we would receive an additional cut of $24,855, which with the proposed budget cut with the city would total $74,000, a cut of $74,565 for us. That is very significant for us, and I'm deeply concerned. I hope that you all will reconsider that. It can't be something that's reevaluated mid-year. We have to come in when I fill that state report out, which I'm working on as we speak, and I file that paperwork with the state, which is due on before October 1st, which is not far from now.
So it is fiscal year.
It is fiscal year. And so I just wanted to make you all aware of that, and I hope you will reconsider that. We are a beehive in this community, and we are an anchor, and we want to be able to continue doing what we do. We are so grateful for everything that you all do for us to allow us to serve this community. So I hope that you will please consider that, and we deeply appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Sherry. Mr. Faruqi was next.
For the time of service, I think I already talked to Kyle. I said he did a great job. That was an awesome job on this report. And I won't say I have a whole lot of questions. I just have some analysis as I look at this report. Under revenues, it looks like, as I look at the numbers, we go from 7.5% in 2021, a gradual decline all the way down to about 700,000 less this year.
In sales and use, I'm not sure what.
Well, I'm not sure. It just says revenues.
Okay.
Okay. So if the trend line continues to show us a reduced revenue flow, and I understand we went to an equal, we wanted expenditures to equal.
Zero, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
In future, and as we go out through the year, we might want to look at how do we get to a less than on that expenditure chart, because that seems to be the trend line. And when you look through some of the reasons
Can you clarify just real quick? I'm make sure I'm following. You're saying revenues are decreasing?
If you look at sales, I'm assuming he's looking at sales and use.
Okay.
There was a decrease in sales tax revenue.
Yeah.
And it was the number he stated.
That's a projected number.
Yeah.
Projected for
That's
24.
not a fact.
But it's from actuals to budget.
23 is actual, 24 is projected.
Okay, I'm on the page that says trends in top revenues.
Correct,
yeah.
Okay, and when I look at that as a percentage from 21 to 22, and I hope I'm not using up a bunch of time to do this because this is not what I wanted to talk about. It goes from 7.5 to 15. Then from 22 to 23, it goes to 1.4%. So it's a drastic drop from 15 to 1.4. This year, projected, we're at 0.7%. Okay, from 24 to 25. So there is a decline in that percentage of revenue coming into the city.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So if the trend line is showing a decrease, we might want to look at planning for how we're going to deal with that in the future.
But in less than 2 weeks, our 2024 has become actuals,
Yeah,
correct?
we're close.
No,
We won't know until the end of
Well, okay, you're right.
cuts off.
Well, it cuts off at that point, but we
Yes.
won't know,
They were mid-September and October, so
Okay.
we won't know till October 31 or on into November.
so even though it's a
Relatively
projection, we kind of have an idea of exactly, I mean,
Conservatively.
okay.
One thing I would point out, and it's maybe a little related, but not really. I think I made the same point you're making to both Monday and today. We do need to be concerned about that. We are, and I'll get you to come when he's finished just to talk about this, but I want you to talk about hard reserves. I think that's an important thing for people to understand, in case there's some catastrophic issue that happens. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Trends in top revenues. As I did the analysis, I'm just seeing that more hotels that we've built over time, we're not necessarily getting the bang for the buck in terms of revenue into the city for the more hotels that we're producing.
I think I would disagree. I think our lodging tax increase is fairly significant, and the new hotels do report that they are having good, I guess, occupancy rates. But
Yeah, I'm just going by the numbers that were given, the 2% based on the total number. There seems to be a gradual reduction in the projections for FY '25.
I got you.
Okay. Under expenditures, a couple comments just, and you guys highlighted them wonderfully. Personnel is a big issue, I get that. And then I would offer that maybe it's not the quantity of the personnel that we have, but necessarily the quantity or the quality of those personnel. And when I speak to quality, I'm not talking about, hey, we need to fire all these folks. What I'm talking about is, what are we expending for training to help these people become the best that they can be for our city. I did not see that in any of the breakdowns we talked about. I'm assuming, like, for example, the police department, that 1.2 or $1.4 million extra isn't going to be involved with police training.
There's a line item, and there's training in every department. That's continuing ed.
Well, yes, but there's a point to what quality of training we're going after.
I would say that for the police department was twofold. There's some pay incentive that's additional, and then there's training, both. But I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
It's not all for just training.
I would offer maybe under the checks, that thing we continually look at every month, that we include the debt service label on those checks. That way we can notify, or we can look at that and say, it makes sense that we're spending, because there's a lot of list of names on there. I have no idea who those people are, or when we bought that service, or.
How is debt service listed on
It's
our
not part of the withdrawal, it does not go through the AP check process, so you would not see it on every bill.
Yeah, it's, I mean, we know that the end number, 7 million or so this year for debt service.
Remember, transparency-wise, y'all agreed to that when we signed the bond documents.
Yeah.
We come and list the schedule of every payment you're going to make till the.
Yeah, we can show you those monthly payments though, because
Yeah.
they were already scheduled, just like a loan. You have your 360 payments. If you get a 30-year mortgage, you can.
A lot of them
we
aren't
can show
monthly
you
either.
that.
Some of them are annual and some of them are semi-annual, so you only see them get paid.
Well, I think it would be of value to show that as a product, either on the website.
That's easy to get.
Okay, thank you. Fleet maintenance, I would offer again that there needs to be more cost-effective vehicles bought in the future. I think I saw over $1 million worth being projected between police, fire, and citywide. And so choosing what you buy versus, you know, how that was done. Oh, P1, P2, that was another question. Is there a laundry list of P1, P2 that we can take a look at?
There is a list of P2. P1 is in the budget, that priority 1, priority 2. The P2 list, there is a list. I can get it and give it to you. It's probably some things that have been on there for a long time, but it's just things that departments want, but I think when they have the meetings, recognize maybe is not an actual need, but yeah.
And that speaks to another point in terms of leadership, in terms of how these things get put. If a P1, for example, the police plan, I'm assuming is part of P1? Okay. What in addition did make that cut, and can we discuss perhaps, or at least have a discussion between you all and the department heads, why don't we raise something to a higher issue as we determine it might be more value?
Yeah, I think that's a valuable point. We can show the list.
I'll note most of the P2 stuff is capital items.
Yeah, so that's a good point too. It wouldn't necessarily be in this budget. There's not much capital actually in the budget, but this is more operations.
Okay, and then maybe.
So it would be like buying, I know there's been an excavator or something like that on Parks and Rec's list for as long as I can remember.
And a mini X. And
yeah, well, I guess, yeah. So things like that are typically on that list. But so what has happened in years past, as Mr. McMaster's pointed out a minute ago, is that we get to the end of the operational budget, and there's a gap of, say, a couple $100,000 between projected revenues and then what the operational expense in the projected budget is, and there's this gap, and so then we go to the P2 and go, okay, now we have to prioritize the P2. This is what's suggested, that we get a mini X, or we do this project at Point Mallard, or whatever, and we fill that gap to get to 0. So,
got it.
But we do have a P2 list, and I can get that to you.
Okay. Well, again, it goes back to let's show that homework, and that where I don't have to ask the question.
We typically do. I don't know. I guess it's just a little different this year, but I can.
No, this was well done. I got to say, this was well done. And then in terms of technology, my analysis says we need to look at consolidating resources. You know my opinion on lawn care and weed abatements, et cetera. But vehicles, for example, in the city overall, there could be some cost savings in terms of everybody operating them straight from here, et cetera. Something to look at. Okay, I don't want to talk about that. Okay, the police department, the budget, There's no timeline scheduled yet that I'm aware of for when all this stuff's supposed to be done. And we've been pushing that noodle for months since
Well, I think the
May.
first bit of it that has to happen is this budget has to be approved. Once the budget's approved.
Okay, that is, I'll call the BS flag on that. We can put out, the chief can put out guidance on when he's going to execute on these plans.
I asked that question to the chief directly yesterday.
And what'd he
so
say?
He didn't have the dates, but I certainly look forward to having those.
Okay, let's not
In the near
continue to look forward. Maybe we can direct
I wouldn't ask him to
activity.
do it on the spot. I asked him to provide that for, well, I'm not the mayor, so.
No, but
if
you're
he
the
will
city council.
provide that to me, you know, I hope that he will.
Okay. All right, I do too.
We have hit 4, but so I know you've got a couple more if you can just wrap up.
Oh, I'm trying as my best. Under the overall budget by department, I applaud this, Kyle, definitely, because this is a heck of a lot easier to look at than what was done previously.
And can I interrupt just one second?
Sure.
Since we have hit 4, I'm going to let you wrap up, but we do have another meeting tomorrow, and you will have the opportunity to continue to voice anything you leave off today.
Well, let me just put it this way, like a Fram oil commercial, you can pay me now or you can pay me later.
Yeah.
Why don't we just pay me now and I can be out of it?
I cut off the Salvation Army, I'm going to cut you off.
Okay, I'm trying to help, I really am.
understand, but
Okay,
I'll give
in
you a
terms of
chance
cutting
to
out,
wrap up.
I would just offer this page, several pages like that. We need to have the personnel listing on there, because I only have 2 that I know of, and that's because Kyle briefed him at the council meeting, the police department and the fire department numbers for personnel. So there's cost effectiveness there in terms of what we're getting, and then what are the measures of effectiveness that each of the departments have said we're going to do. That would be added benefit.
Yeah, and I think I've said that same thing for about 3 or 4 years about when we had some, frankly, some things I'm glad didn't pass when I look at this budget that were major costs that would have compounded for many years as far as changes in pay scale. I honestly don't know where we would be this year if those had passed. And what I've said is I don't have a problem. I do think we have to pay competitively. I've said that today. But I do think it's important that if we're going to give, so in the merit system, you get a step increase, which is we call, what's the other thing we call that? A merit increase. Merit increase. I just always want to challenge, in a good way, department heads to make sure that it's merited. And I assume that it is, but I know that almost everyone every year that is available to get a merit increase gets it. And so that makes it seem less like a merit increase to me than
Seems
just
more like a COLA.
Subjective measure.
yeah.
Right, and I thought that you would have seen already a request from HR for a program for the city to go into and force this smart objectives for all the employees.
I have heard of that. I haven't seen it.
Okay, that's
There
tragic.
is some software that's in this budget related to HR that is going to help directly with performance evaluation and getting that more streamlined than
Yeah.
the process we're doing right now.
Yeah, and I would offer, having lived through that, it's a hell of a lot more than software. It's training that has to be done at the individual level to get that done.
Okay, thank you.
Last thing, real quick, last thing. Truth in Advertising, Mayor, I would highly recommend you get on the board and have an interview and talk to the public and all these organizations about what these appropriations mean for past expectations versus future expectations. Get ahead of that today versus tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kyle, can you just briefly talk to us about the hard reserves and what is legally required, and then kind of what we...
So there is a resolution, I believe. I think it's a resolution. We're required to hold 25% of the budgeted.
Just to clarify, that's a local resolution. That's not a requirement by the
State requirement is 10%. Our local resolution states that we were to have 25% of the general fund budgeted total fund. So if you take the amount we have here today times 0.25, we adjust accounting-wise that part of fund balance to reflect that reserve. And the purpose of it is exactly for kind of what you touched on. If a tornado rips through here or something catastrophic happens to the city, we have a hard reserve that could be utilized to offset some of those costs. And an indirect, very big pro to having that reserve, when we do go to issue warrants and we get debt, that is a large requirement that they love seeing. They've complimented Decatur and our financial position related to that.
It's cash.
For that purpose.
And we decreased that from 35% to 25%.
When did we do that?
When did we do that?
We did that, I want to say 3 councils ago, unnecessarily. We should have stayed there. We had greedy council members who wanted to dip into that fund, and, but we were at 25%. It actually read, Herman, correct me if I'm wrong, but it read 25% of revenues and 10% of expenditures, and they said that it meant a combination, but it was they were in addition to each other.
So,
Am I wrong?
That's right. It was adjusted to reflect what advisors said was adequate balance. But the idea is to have 3 months in reserve.
Yeah.
That's what, the
Yes, sir.
25%, that's pretty
So
simple.
I guess what I'm saying is we were, at one point, we were a lot more.
Right, that's right.
We had a lot more reserve there. It helped us in our bond rating. It helped us in so many different ways. It gave us that protective layer, but this is good, but it's not as good as where we've been in the past.
and you could say it wouldn't be as good as 50%.
You could, but like I said, we were at 35%, and so, yeah, this works, but it's not that protective layer that we've once had.
I didn't know that. That's good to know. My only point with that is, and I think especially if you look at other cities that people think have these booming, great economies, like some of our neighbors, they do not have 25% in hard reserve, not even close to it. Some of them are pushing the legal guideline. And so I think when we look at revenues are flattening, there could be this story written, bang, of things are maybe there's citizens would be nervous about, but that's just not the case. We do have revenues that are cooling off, just like the whole country is from a few years ago. But we are very well secure, really because of that 25% that we've got in hard reserves that are set aside for basically 3 months of expenses. If we collected zero for 3 months, we would survive that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yep.
I think that's something people miss.
I'll add to internal control wise and the setup that we have here in Decatur. It's not going to sneak up and bite you all of a sudden. We're in financial ruin. We meet too frequently. Capital comes across y'all's table too often, and that mid-year review requirement that we have is all there for design to evaluate where you are in shorter periods of time instead of just talking about the budget once every 12 months.
Before we go, I want to echo, actually, Mr. Faruqi. You guys did a really good job. I appreciate the presentation. Dawn, you guys and your team, please pass that back to everybody that was involved, department heads and everybody, but especially finance. I know y'all this is a fun time for you guys, but I appreciate the work. I know it's never going to be perfect. It's not what everybody wants. There maybe needs to be some small adjustments or whatever, but we'll get it fixed and go from there. But we appreciate your work.
Great. Thank y'all for working with us. Appreciate it.
Anything else from the council today? We do have a meeting tomorrow at 2. Right now there are 3 agenda items. I don't know where we'll end, but the main one would be to potentially approve the budget. It would take a double vote tomorrow. If not, we'll have to come back. So with that, we're adjourned for today. Thanks.
Yes.